I have to wait for this chain of suspensions to kickstart today's program. This is vk3sl. Test missions on 160 metres and welcome. Yes, Beethoven at the helm. His Ninth Symphony, second movement, Molto Vivace. It's with the Philharmonia Baroque, otherwise known as the Suicide Scherzo from the Clockwork Orange. Anyhow, we are back here and nothing to report. It's bunkering down, and it's interesting. I'm starting to sort of change my orientation, start to look at the things around me a little bit more closely. And I did notice this morning, I woke up early, I couldn't sleep last night, and I woke up really early, and usually there's a rumble of traffic. There's just a very, very low murmur of traffic can be heard from this locale. It's quite evident. But there was inky black silence. There wasn't a single sound. And then I heard the birds at the reserve below. It's a very different landscape. It's interesting. You get so acquainted to a particular noise level, and suddenly things with this curfew, we have silence in the suburbs. Incredible. So, yeah, that's one of the small positives. Try to look at positives here. Try to find things to latch onto. I've been for a walk. Went to a walk at the reserve and saw some nodding greenwood orchids. That's a bonus. In fact, the reserve's looking particularly good at the moment. So one of the last vestiges of virgin bush in Melbourne's burbs. Quite a hinterland. And it's a good place to go for a stroll. So yes, we just look at our immediate surrounds. Now, I haven't really thought much about today, but I did get a text earlier on. I only just had a chance to look at it now. And Mr. H chimed in with a recommendation from Jacob Collier, his latest. This is from The Late Show. And it's a live performance of Running Out of Love. Now, he did play this from his latest album, On the Missions, last Friday night. But this is a live version of it. And in some ways, it may have a little bit more immediacy being live. So it's pretty impressive. So this is the sort of things that people get up to in the lockdown times. I think it's been produced at home. Anyhow, listen to Tori Kelly and Jacob Collier, and we're going to hear Running Out of Love. This is vk3sl, testing on 160.
It ain't always easy getting through to you. Complicating, overthinking every move. I like to think you know the things here in my mind. But here we are, I can't seem to get this right. I don't know how to do it, I get so close to you, but then you look at me like I'm not there. I'm always thinking about you, wanna learn how to love you. Keeping me in the dark, it just ain't fair. I wanna know about it, if you wanna talk about it, I'll be waiting for you to take me there. So won't you tell me what you wanna do? Cause baby, it don't matter to me, even if you say that you're oh, yeah, yeah. Even if you wanna let it go. Keep it to yourself, I wanna make you feel alright. If you've been running out of love, running out of love.
Every morning I wake up and you're not there. But you know I'm always thinking about you there. 'Cause I like to think you know the way I feel about you deep inside. But here we are, and I just want to make things right. I don't know how to do it. Right now I'm going through it. making you feel like we'd be going nowhere. I'm always thinking about the time we'll be spending together. Right now I guess I need you more than ever. So tell me all about
Tell me all
I
about
need to know about
Wanna
it.
know
I
about
need to if we're gonna go somewhere. So won't you tell me what you're going through? Cause baby it don't matter to me.
Even if you say that you're right. No, no.
Even if you say that you're alone.
Even if you wanna let
Even if you wanna let it
go.
don't let it go.
Keep it to yourself. I wanna make you feel alright. If you've been running out of love. If you've been running out of
Jacob Collier, Running Out of Love. Yes, we've been listening to his latest release, and that's with Tori Kelly. So there we go. We are testing here on 160 meters test missions, and we also stream on YouTube. In fact, the computer did an update at the precise moment I was set to go today, so anyhow, it's recovered itself, so we may be a bit late with the stream, but there we have it. It's under my call sign, it's the name of a channel, and it's the go-to place, and there's also an archive of previous missions there, logs of the last few months worth of, especially well, no, it's been actually everything's logged there, and there's another a site with the previous Friday night missions where they're logged as well, but that all can be accessed via my blog page. So that's vk3sl.blogspot.com. It's the go-to place for everything, and there's also an email address referenced there if you need to get in touch, if you'd like to make contact. So we hope we're not treading on anyone's shoes. There's not a lot of activity on 160, this part of the band, in the evenings. I did monitor things quite closely for some time before I made the decision to do these ongoing tests. But if there's any issue, please do get in touch. I don't want to be upsetting anybody with these modulated sound test missions. It's just a whim. Nothing else. We have been testing during the last 24 hours, working on turntables, refining things. And one of my test records has been an old 78 of Cedric Sharp. Cedric Sharp was an English cellist, beautiful player, and I think he's playing a serenade. Let's hold the record up to the microphone. It's Cedric Sharp, cello solo with Gerald Moore on the piano, a record made in the early 40s. He's playing a serenade by Piani. And I think this is quite beautiful, and it's been quite a good way to test off each time. vk3sl. That was a recording of Cedric Sharp playing the cello. It's exactly the sort of cello playing that I really like. Expansive, it has diction, it's got a lovely openness to the sound. It's not full of hyper manic vibrato, electric bell vibrato. It's a totally different aesthetic to what we have today. It's interesting to hear that. I think I like that so much I'm going to play the other side. It seems to have a different meaning when you put things to air. I've listened to that probably 50 times in the last few days. And it's fresh. It's like I'm listening to it for the first time. So, let's hear the Chant Sans Parole by Tchaikovsky on the other side. And we go back and have another listen to Cedric Sharp. Beautiful playing. This is vk3sl testing. So good to have these turntables working properly again. Cedric Sharp and Gerald Moore at the piano, a recording made in the early 1940s for Decca. And we're sampling a few 78s here. I have had a flush out recently. I've got a lot of 78s in storage, and I moved a whole lot of things around and brought out a couple of big boxes that I haven't looked at for a very long time. And amongst them is a lot of string players, historic recordings of string players, including the disc we just heard. Also, there is a record of Emanuel Feuermann that's just struck upon me. And this looks most interesting. I have never heard this, and I really want to hear it. Feuermann was probably the premier cellist of his generation, if not all time. He was a legend. And he died young. He died having an appendix operation, I think. He was only in his 30s. But he's a legendary player. And my cello teacher, Mr. Tuzo, back in the early 1930s, actually studied with Feuermann for a short time. He even had some of Feuermann's books. He studied with Feuermann in Berlin. Feuermann had to get out of Berlin literally overnight. And it's one of those horrible stories of persecution and quick exit. I think the rest of it can be left to the imagination. Anyhow, Feuermann went on to do amazing things in America for quite a few years, and he became a living legend. Made a lot of recordings with Heifetz. In fact, his piano trio with Heifetz and Rubinstein was known as the $1 Million Trio. I think it had something to do with the ballpark of their contracts. Anyhow, let's have a listen to, speaking of millions, Le Million de Harlequin is the name of the piece. It's a little piece by Drigo, and it's a recording with Emanuel Feuermann made when he went to US, I think, in about 1935. Again, with Gerald Moore on the piano. I'm most interested to hear this record. vk3sl testing. Superb playing. It doesn't come better than that. He had such control over his sound, over his tone, and his vibrato is legendary. Wow, Emmanuel Foreman, that's a record I'd never heard. Well, we'll save that up, I think, for a Friday night missions. It deserves a replay for sure. So, Frank, if you're listening, we'll have to revisit that disc. It's something quite special, and I had absolutely no idea I had it. So we're going through a big box of records I haven't seen before. And in my hand is a Louis Levy and his orchestra. Now, we all know that Janet Lind sang with Louis Levy. And this record is from the 1930s. The question is she singing on this disc? It says with vocalists, but we have no idea who the vocalist is. So I'm going to put it on. I'll have a listen and see what happens. Another Columbia from about 1936. This is vk3sl. Testing.
and dear to me. I was born in Vienna. I was born in Vienna, with a waltz in my heart and with a heart that had to sing. Sing about Vienna, sing about her sights, and sing about her sounds, and sing about her nights. To her and to her life I ever will belong, for I'm a part of her song.
Selections from The Great Waltz with Louis Levy and his orchestra. Fantastic orchestrations. I think Peter York had something to do with them. And I'm not sure if it was Janet or not. It did sound a bit like her, but I get confused. I need to sort of do some research, I think. Janet Lind, who was a local girl, did sing with Louis Levy for quite a period, from about 36 to 38. Made quite a few records, but I wasn't aware that that was one of them. It could be somebody else. Anyhow, it doesn't matter. We've been listening to the best of British there and rolling a few 78s tonight on the Missions. Afternoon test sessions on 160 metres. This is the escapist domain here. This is where we all hibernate from the real world, which is in a very strange state at the moment. We have to find alternatives. Acknowledging a most interesting email from Mr. S, hearing about Mr. A. L. It sounds most interesting indeed. All right, we'll definitely follow up on that story in time. Now, what next? What next? Well, I've got a couple of things on the cards. One of them is some chamber music. Now, this may not last on the log. I've had a bit of a problem with some of these recordings, some Sony music. They don't, YouTube don't like them. These performances get excised, so we might have a cut, a snip in the file. So if that happens, I'm sorry you've missed out, but we'll I'm sure you can find it some other way, although it's not on YouTube to my best knowledge. Now I'm just firing up this old Apple Mac. Put my password in and we'll find out what we've got. Yes, a Beethoven trio. Now this is from an anthology of Casals and Friends, recordings made at the Prague festivals in the early 50s. They're particularly interesting recordings. Casals was, again, another cellist, another living legend, and in his 80s there was a series of festivals in this town called Prague in the south of France. And near this, no, I won't try and locate it, in the mountains. Anyhow, and musicians from all over the world came to play with Casals, to perform with him. He'd been sort of in self-imposed exile for quite a few years before. He refused to play in public because he felt very strongly, he had very strong political views against the Franco regime, the fascist regime in Spain, and he refused, as his own quiet protest, he refused to play for a long time. But that all changed when he set up these Prague festivals. So he was already pretty old by this stage, but musicians far and wide came to partake in them. And they're the stuff of legends, really amazing stories, great hive of creativity. Anyhow, they were recorded by Columbia, a lot of the concerts at these festivals, and they were released in a series of anthologies in the 1990s, early 1990s. We haven't seen much of them since. So we're going to hear one of those recordings now. This is Beethoven's very first piano trio. In fact, it's his Opus 1, number 1. So this is it. This is the very beginning of Mr. B, Beethoven's place on the musical stage. This is where it all started, and a very early work of Beethoven's. It's a beautiful piece. It's a little trio. It's in E flat, and in this instance, we're going to hear Eugene Isterman on the piano, Josef Fuchs, who's the fiddle player, beautiful fiddle player like Fuchs is playing, and Pablo Casals on the cello. So what we'll do, we'll fade in. This is the new system, and I'm hoping it is working seamlessly. I have to get a mouse for this, then it'll be a lot easier. But let's have a listen to this piano trio, Opus 1, number 1 by Ludwig van Beethoven. I'm vk3sl, Test Missions. Is a test transmission from vk3sl. Transmission from vk3sl. A very youthful Beethoven. Had some work written in 1793, and only 2 years after Mozart passed away. It's Beethoven's piano trio, Opus 1, number 1, the beginning of a meteoric career. And that's where it all started. Amazing music. That was written for Prince Lichnowsky. He dedicated the work to him. And they were published in 1795, but written in 1793. There's a couple in that series. So there we go. No, it's 3. There's 3 piano trios. That's right. So very delightful, characterful writing, very much in the Mozart tradition. And the recording we heard was with Casals and Friends, made in 1953 at the Prades Festival. So that's from an anthology on Sony. So it may not last the test, the log test on YT. Last time I put one of these anthologies up, it was excised. All right, hopefully the next one won't be excised. We're going to hear a Beethoven symphony now, and this is one of the tapes from Mr. F's collection. So we've done a quick re-spool and organised, and it's Beethoven Symphony number 7 in A, his Opus 92, a work written about 20 years after what we just heard. And I think this work speaks for itself, really, but there is a nice little tidbit here. There's a nice bit of information about Mr. Beethoven's eccentricities. And it says in the premiere, Louis Spohr, who was a composer associate of Beethoven's, he said that he mentions Beethoven's antics on the podium as a conductor. It says, as a sforzando occurred, he tore his arms with a great vehemence asunder. At the entrance of a forte, he jumped in the air. So there we go. So, and it was very well received. It's one of Beethoven's greatest works, and it's very much in the popular canon. Now, the recording we're going to hear is off an old Columbia tape. What does it say? The Philharmonia Orchestra with Herbert von Karajan. It's a Columbia high-fidelity tape recording from the 50s, and these, if it's as good as any others we've been listening to, it should be very, very passable. In fact, excellent. So I think we have everything fired up, ready to go. This is VK3SL testing on 160 metres in the narrowband FM mode. Let's listen to Beethoven's Symphony number 7 in A major. This is a test transmission from vk3sl. This is a test transmission from vk3sl. This is VK3sl. So we're testing on 160, the narrowband FM mode. And we had a little bit of a glitch early on. We've had a couple of glitches actually tonight. One was that the transmitter was starting to go into low power. And I thought it might have been the exciter, but the restart didn't do anything, and I think it's just SWR. It's so cold outside. It's freezing. And when there's a lot of moisture in the air and rainfall, the antenna parameters change a bit. All right, we are just changing the tape over. And yeah, the other glitch, well, I think I've played this before. I completely lose track of what I played when I haven't played. And I think I have played this fairly recently, and I remember doing a repair on this tape now. So that's what happens. We cycle around and around. But this is such great music, I could listen to it over and over without any problem. Oh, yes, just trying to get the tape wound onto the spool here using the QMaster 77 Mark VG. I always think that's a bit of a strange one. VG, very good. Well, they're not that good. But they were made locally when we had a manufacturing industry. And it's the last of the S-Drive units. Okay, we've wound the tape back on, and the last two movements, the third movement, Presto, and the fourth movement, Allegro con brio. We're listening to a recording with Karajan conducting the Philharmonia Orchestra of Beethoven's Symphony No. 7 in A major. This is VK3sl. Testing. Oh, such elation. Beethoven Symphony No. 7 in A major, a recording made in the 50s with Karajan conducting the Philharmonic Orchestra, released on a Columbia high-fidelity tape recording. vk3sl, we've been testing on 160 narrowband FM mode. Corona emissions, we've been doing this for quite some time, since at the onset of the first lockdown. And we will continue, all being well. So thank you for your indulgence if you've hung around this long, and we will be back. And thank you. Cheers for now.